toot my own horn, and I know that I'm setting myself up for probably disappointment later tonight, but I hope you were with us last week on the Final Five, because we almost swept the board. We had 2 out of 3 on the power play points with Reinhart and Matthews. We hit the goal scorer line A. We hit the side with Washington. We hit the total with the over in Toronto and Buffalo. So we had a really good Final Five last week, and I'm hoping that we can now ride that wave.
Only on SportsGrid.
50 points in a fourth quarter for the Atlanta Hawks. Like, what is going on? It's like circus numbers. What are we doing?
And we sound like two old heads complaining. It's a tough watch. It's a tough watch sometimes. I don't mind the shooting. I just know the numbers. Like, when you strictly look at it from the numbers in betting, it's getting really hard to bet.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
Louis Riddick has interviewed for every job in North America. And I'm not just talking football. I'm talking about every business in North America of any kind whatsoever. Tire companies, grocery store CEOs, shopping malls, insurance companies. What job hasn't Louis Riddick interviewed for?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
The NBA will take center stage once football stops, and people will watch the NBA playoffs and all that. But the standings are whacked out in the Western Conference. Like, Oklahoma City, Memphis, and the Houston Rockets are the best teams in the conference.
You want to talk about a team with overs and no defense? The Wizards are your team. It's unbelievable. They can't make a total high enough. It's nuts.
Sports Rage tonight. Weeknights 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Only on SportsGrid.
Good morning. Welcome to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. I'm Craig Mish. Happy Tuesday to all of you watching. We got an action-packed show for you here today. College basketball, of course, heating up. Some finals from last night. We'll get into that. Also, the drama in the NBA continues as we march on with the season trade deadline approaching. Gilbert McGregor will join us courtesy of Sporting News. We'll also break down Friday night's Cotton Bowl game. We've got a big one coming up as we'll see if Ohio State can continue to march on as they take on Texas. In addition, our friend covering all of sports media, Simon Applebaum, is here with us in the studios, and I'll talk to him about this upcoming Fubo merger as well. So stay on the grid for all of that as well. So we'll get into the NFL, but let's start with a potential new piece of legislation in New Hampshire that involves sports betting. So those of you in the Northeast potentially interested in this, I'm going to tell you a little bit more. There's a new bill that's being proposed to raise the age limits of sports betting in a state here in our country. The state is New Hampshire, of course, a smaller state, but needless to say, they're trying to raise the ages from 18 to 21 to bet on sports. The move would decrease the state's annual sports betting revenue, and that's really the key, by several $100,000 because nobody who is 18, 19, or 20 will be able to bet, but it is more for security and making sure responsible gambling is involved. Needless to say, there are 18 other markets that are going to be watching this very closely. Kentucky, Washington, Wyoming, Washington, D.C. as well. Potentially, could New Hampshire set the bar for sports betting where other states decide to go from 18 to 21, would cut back on a lot of revenue, but would have more responsible gaming? Wait to see. All right, now let's get to the National Football League. Antonio Pierce, no longer the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. He did a press conference saying he didn't know he was day-to-day. Felt like he just marched on. That's not the case. Another new head coach for the Raiders since they moved to Las Vegas. I believe this will be their fourth, and they've only been there a short period of time. Not a great year for Pierce, not a great season, although they did finish with some wins in the end. Went through several quarterbacks as well. Statement for the Raiders: we appreciate Antonio's leadership as an interim coach and then as the head coach. Of course, he grew up a Raiders fan and has silver and black roots. We wish him nothing but the best in the future. Interestingly enough, Tom Telesco, the general manager of the Las Vegas Raiders, will be back for another season, so he'll be the one hiring the new head coach and also potentially drafting a quarterback, which the Raiders desperately will need in the upcoming 2025 NFL Draft. Dallas Cowboys look like they will be retaining Mike McCarthy. Jerry Jones said that he would, and it looks like he's going to stick to that because they denied permission to the Chicago Bears to interview him. The permission was asked for earlier in the week. His contract, of course, will expire on Wednesday, but the Cowboys hold exclusive negotiating rights through next week, and after that, they would not need permission. The Bears will also interview former Super Bowl winning coach Pete Carroll on Thursday, former coach, of course, of Seattle. Now, the Miami Dolphins appear to be keeping Tyreek Hill in the mix for the time being, after Hill on Sunday said that he was out and was even potentially looking for a trade. Hill, in his exit interview with the Dolphins, said not so much. Chris Greer, the general manager of the Miami Dolphins, was asked about Hill and whether or not he will be retained for the upcoming season or traded.
I will say Mike and I both had conversations with Tyreek here yesterday, productive conversations. I will keep those between us. The one thing I would say is in a frustrating season, he was very emotional in a game where we had a chance coming back from 2-6. And I would say that's probably the thing I'm most proud of. The players and Mike and the coaching staff, that we were 2-6 and we're playing week 18 to potentially sneak in the playoffs. And I think all of that with him playing through his injury just kind of bubbled to a point. And from our conversations, again, we'll keep that private, but we had productive conversations.
As far as the San Francisco 49ers are concerned, they've made a pair of coaching changes. Their special teams coordinator was fired, and now their defensive coordinator is also out. Nick Sorensen is no longer the DC in San Francisco. Also, David Montgomery, running back for the Detroit Lions, after their bye week, could return for round 2 with the Lions, since, of course, they are off this week. In college basketball last night, home court advantage served the Gators well in Gainesville. They beat number 1 Tennessee by a final of 73-43. Yes, a 30-point win for Florida yesterday, so expect them to move up in the rankings. They did Tennessee 12 for 56 from the field. That's harder to do than you think. Just 21% from the field, and they shot 4 for 29 from three-point range. Rick Barnes, the head coach of Tennessee, very clearly not happy with the offensive performance.
Well, early we had a ton of open shots. First play of the game, Chaz Lanier hadn't been that open in a long time, and then they weren't going in. Then I thought we lost our poise. I thought we had the wrong guys shooting the ball at the wrong time. And again, give Florida a ton of credit. They played well. They did what on the boards that we like to do to people, which I thought was a difference in the game. But I thought that we, again, got rushed, kind of came disconnected on the offensive end. There was guys open that took some shots, and that could very well be by design. But I just didn't think that, again, taking nothing away from them, they were terrific. Good for us. I think it's good for us. I really do. I think we're going to learn a lot from this. And I told our guys, first thing I said walking, I said, this is good for us. Because now we're going to learn what we got to do to get better. And we got to get better play, obviously, out of our front line. They've got to do a better job. I thought they had their way in there on the front line, which I thought was really the difference in the game.
If Auburn continues to win on Monday of next week, they'll be the number 1 team in the country. They hold on to beat Texas in Austin final 87-82. Also, Georgia took care of Kentucky on the road 82-69. And Michigan goes into UCLA and picks up a huge win over the number 22 team in the country, 94-79, as the Wolverines are expected to move up ahead of UCLA after the win. Mick Cronin, head coach of the Bruins, not particularly pleased with his team's outcome.
That many points, how much of it is a hat tip to their unique skill set with the size and outside shooting they have versus maybe some breakdowns on your end?
I'd say a combination, to be fair to your question. Obviously, they shot the ball well. But we don't play, we're soft. You know, we're too soft to play hard enough even in the crucials, you can't get an offensive rebound. You know, it's like a 5-point game, and Kobe Johnson just has a guy take the ball from him. Same thing with Sebastian Mack. Okay, we finally do get a stop. Can't get a defensive rebound. They didn't have a million of them because they didn't miss that many shots. But there was a few in particular. Kobe, Sebastian, huge, back-breaking. And you get inside position. So don't tell me you want to win. Like, just don't tell me you want to win. You go start the game. Tyler Bilodeau gave up 12 points. 2 screens, he didn't say a word, 3s, and then he got dunked on 3 times. So don't tell me you want to win.
You can tell rough night for the Bruins there. All right, one signing in Major League Baseball yesterday as the hot stove continues to trickle on. The San Francisco Giants are the next destination for Justin Verlander. His 20th season will be played in the National League, and it will be played with San Francisco. It's a 1-year deal, $15 million, as Verlander's career continues at 42 years old. NIU, Northern Illinois, is joining the Mountain West as a football school coming soon in 2026. The announcement was made yesterday. No surprise that Ashton Genty from Boise State, one of the all-time leading rushers in the history of college football, has declared for the NFL draft. And also Notre Dame's running back Jeremiah Love looks like he's going to be able to play Thursday night in the college football semifinal. He rushed for over 1,000 yards and 16 touchdowns during the regular season. Bradley Beal, and as of right now, it appears as that he is not waiving his no-trade clause to leave the Phoenix Suns. His agent says still looking at offers to see what the possibilities are. Zion Williamson returned after missing 20-plus games, 22 points last night. Pelicans lose to the Wolves. Jason Tatum, 29. Celtics beat the Nuggets 118-106. Nikola Jokic didn't play, and also the Mavericks finally get a win, 118-97 over the Lakers. Gilbert McGregor from Sporting News up next.
Just 3 games left in this historic college football season. Thursday, Notre Dame.
Notre Dame is definitely one of the top teams in the nation.
Clash with Penn State. Friday, Ohio State looks to slow down the Horns, with the Buckeyes favored to top Texas.
You know what I see? 2 similar plays? Jackpot, cherry. I'm nimble for a big man.
Follow along for every play and every bet with in-game live game day, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
He will never repeat this year again as he gets older. It's not happening. That's not the way the world works. In the NFL, when you get older, your numbers dive. That's all there is to it.
Why did you play him for as long as you played him against Dallas if you weren't going to play him this week to break the record? I mean, you left him in that Dallas game forever.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Gilbert McGregor is with us from Sporting News. The NBA rolls on. Trade deadline coming, I believe, in about a month. We got the All-Star game coming. We're going to be arguing about if it's good or not once again this year. I feel like that's an annual conversation. Let's start on the court, then we'll go off the court as Gilbert joins us here on the show. Gilbert, great to have you back here on NewsWire. Let's dive into the Celtics-Nuggets game last night, which was supposed to be a marquee game on the slate this season. Again, these teams only played twice, but Nikola Jokic sick, so he didn't play. And then I think at that point you had to figure Boston was going to win. They did pretty easily.
Absolutely. Game lost a little bit of its luster when we found out Nikola Jokic wasn't going to play. Derek White also inactive for the Celtics. I'm sure that hurt for him in front of his hometown fans in Denver. And that took a little bit away from the game, but the Celtics took care of business. We know the Celtics are oftentimes a team who lets up a little bit when the other team's best player isn't in action, but they didn't do that. I know the Nuggets hung around, and it's a good effort from Michael Porter Jr. and Russell Westbrook and Jamal Murray, the guys who did suit up. But the Celtics are trying to work through a little bit of a slump, and I think that yesterday's game was a big step toward doing that. Anytime the league's most recent two champions go head-to-head, it's a marquee matchup regardless of who suits up. But I'm sure the Celtics will take some confidence from that one, even if Jokic didn't step up and play in that game. And the Celtics will continue this trip that they're on and try and get back on track because they did have a strange slump.
Would you say Porzingis was the main reason they won last night? 25 points, plus 14 on the court yesterday.
Big game from Porzingis. I know he's had some injury issues. The situation that held him out at the beginning of the year with the weird ankle injury that he suffered during the finals, and then still having some ankle injuries this year. So for him to bounce back and come back on the floor, and had a huge first quarter in this game last night. So the fact that they're trying to establish him and take advantage of the fact that Jokic wasn't on the floor, I think that shows he's the big difference maker for them regardless of what happens once they get to the postseason. Having Porzingis and a healthy Porzingis will be the key to the Celtics repeating this year.
All right, so now let's go out west where the Miami Heat's on a 5-game road trip without Jimmy Butler. As we know, they blew the first game against Sacramento, had a big lead and blew it. Somehow they go on the road, though, and they really, I mean, maybe one of their best performances of the season at Golden State. They win 114-98. Their bench really performed at a high level, hit 9 threes. Bam Adebayo had a nice game as well, and that's kind of been the deal here. As of right now, without Jimmy Butler, Gilbert, most feel that the team and the plays should run through Bam. And so when he has a good night, the Heat tends to win. And when he doesn't, they almost need like 40 points from Hero or they have no shot.
Yeah, it's been a strange season for Bam Adebayo. He's had some ups and downs this year, and specific to last night, it was definitely an up. And last night's game, I look at it as kind of a matchup of two dysfunctional teams or teams that are in states of disarray. The Warriors have their issues after starting the season 12-3. Now they're 18-18, and it doesn't take a mathematician to know that that's 6-15 over their last 21 games. So things are trending in the wrong direction for the Warriors right now, and things are trending in a weird direction for the Heat with the Jimmy Butler saga, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So one of those teams had to find a way to figure out to win. I think it's really disappointing for the Warriors to lose to a team who's on the second end of a back-to-back and having played in double overtime the night before. So the Heat dug deep, and I think games like this are a reminder of what that Heat culture that people sometimes roll their eyes at, but what that's about, and shows what this team is made up of, regardless of who suits up, who shows up on the floor, how tired you are. They find ways to win. I think that makes them an attractive destination for whoever they get and whatever trade package is on the way for them.
Yeah, and that's the thing right now is that it's kind of hard to deal when you're at a detriment, which is where the Heat is, knowing, and everybody else knowing that Jimmy Butler wants out. I mean, he carried the Heat for at least 3 seasons. I mean, it's unequivocal how good he was while everybody else was trying to get better. He played at a Hall of Fame level, getting them all the way to the finals a couple times. And, this is just kind of who he is, Gilbert. Like, I don't know why anybody should be surprised. He's one of those guys in the NBA, like James Harden and, Kawhi, I guess, to a degree that it seems to me they really like the attention and they like changing things up. Kevin Durant, I should mention him as another one, too. It feels like Jimmy Butler just wants to try something new. I mean, it's sad to say for Pat Riley and the Heat, but that's the way it is. Maybe he went about it the wrong way. That could be debated. But I don't think it started at that press conference, by the way, Gilbert. I think this has been going on, and he just wasn't getting out, and this is his way of pushing out. So the teams, Phoenix, Houston, Dallas, Golden State, maybe. Orlando's making a huge push this year. Maybe that would be a team, but I don't know how he would fit with their chemistry. And it seems to me that if a lot of teams wanted Jimmy Butler, Gilbert, he would have been traded already. So there's got to be the right fit here.
No, it's certainly an interesting situation as far as what faces Jimmy Butler. First of all, this is a guy with a big personality. You said it. And what makes him so good on the floor and that headstrong approach to the game is also what leads to situations like this. And we've seen it in Minnesota, in Philadelphia, and now in Miami. So when you look forward and what that means for a team who's willing to trade for a 35-year-old player who still has a lot to offer, the Suns seem like they make the most sense. It seems like he wants to be in Phoenix, and it seems like Phoenix wants him there. But the trouble with that is they don't have very many ways to make that happen. Bradley Beal is the guy whose money would work, but he has a no-trade clause, and there are a lot of hoops to jump through with that. So the question is, what team thinks that they're one piece away, and that piece is Jimmy Butler to help them win a championship? I look at Houston. Maybe that could happen. He's from Houston. He's from Texas, so Dallas could be a look as well. So it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out.
Let's go now to one of the games of the night. We got Oklahoma City taking on Cleveland, maybe a finals preview if you believe Cleveland is legit. They're 2.5-point favorites. They've been the best team in the East, maybe not named Boston or even better than Boston, depending on how you look at it. OKC is fantastic. Very close point spread here tells you it's a dead even heat here. 228 is the total. Do you have a position tonight?
I'm leaning back and forth. This is a big stretch for Oklahoma City. They just got wins over the Knicks and the Celtics, so they get a chance to prove themselves again against an elite team in the Eastern Conference. But they're on the road. Chet Holmgren is still out. Alex Caruso won't be playing. So I'm starting to lean back towards the Cavaliers, even though the Thunder always step up when these games are big like this. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is somebody you can almost always pencil in for 30 points in a game. But slightly leaning Cavs because they're at home tonight.
Yeah, 31 points is his prop tonight. I mean, that's insane. And the over is minus 125 on that. Jalen Williams at 20, Donovan Mitchell 22. Who do you think on that list here as the best game tonight, Gilbert?
I like Evan Mobley. He's kind of a guy who's having that leap this year that everybody's been expecting from him. Kenny Atkinson has unlocked him. He's in the midst of some big performances. So Evan Mobley in a game like this, because that front court, he and Jared Allen, Isaiah Hartenstein can't handle both of those guys. So I think Evan Mobley has a big game.
All right, Clippers Nuggets tonight. Clippers 2.5-point favorites, and the reason why is because Jokic, I guess, has got to be at least questionable. Is this the one you got to stay away from until you know if Jokic is playing?
Stay away from this one until you know. And the only thing I would say of this, and the under looks enticing, this is a stingy Clippers defense and a Nuggets team on second end of a back-to-back.
All right, Gilbert. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks again for coming on.
Sounds good. You too.
Cotton Bowl preview up next.
Just 3 games left in this historic college football season. Thursday, Notre Dame.
Notre Dame is definitely one of the top teams in the nation.
Clash with Penn State. Friday, Ohio State looks to slow down the Horns, with the Buckeyes favored to top Texas.
You know what I see? 2 similar plays. Jackpot. Cherry. For a big man.
Follow along for every play and every bet with in-game live game day, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
He will never repeat this year again as he gets older. It's not happening. That's not the way the world works. In the NFL, when you get older, your numbers dive. That's all there is to it.
Why did you play him for as long as you played him against Dallas if you weren't going to play him this week to break the record? I mean, you left him in that Dallas game forever.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Yesterday here on the show, we previewed the Thursday night semifinal matchup in college football. Today here in the Sound Off, we preview the big Friday night matchup between Texas and Ohio State. Let's get it started. Time for the SportsGrid Sound Off. Well, Friday night they'll play this one at the Cotton Bowl, so the fans in Austin are headed over to watch the Longhorns play. But Ohio State is a 6-point favorite going into this matchup. It should be a fun one, although the Buckeyes are the hottest team going right now in all of college football. Ever since that loss to Michigan, they seem to have turned the corner. Let's get a preview with our very own Joe Lisi of the game on Friday night.
The stage is set for a dynamic college football playoff semifinal matchup between the Ohio State Buckeyes and Texas Longhorns. Ohio State's hitting on all cylinders entering this matchup. They've dominated both Tennessee and Oregon respectively, with their quarterback Will Howard completing well over 70% of his passes. Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Quinshawn Judkins, and Travion Henderson are abusing opposing defenses, and the Longhorns are going to need a dynamic effort to step up and win this ball game. Ohio State is opened as a 5.5-point favorite. We saw this total now 53.5 across multiple books. Let's not forget, game is played in Arlington, Texas. Texas should travel well from a fan base perspective. When you look at the Longhorns, they struggled against Arizona State, but won that ball game in double overtime by 8 points. Early on, I'm taking the Longhorns to win this ball game outright. Now, Craig, back to you.
Wow, big prediction there from Joe Lisi, as a nice money line outcome would be there. If that's going to happen, then Quinn Ewers is going to have a big game. But in speaking with the media ahead of the game on Friday night, it doesn't seem like Texas is going to run any very aggressive offensive plays, at least early on in the game. It seems like getting a feel for it is the way that Quinn Ewers, their quarterback, wants to go.
Yeah, well, I think if we go out and just play our game, get completions early, and just continue to have first and second down wins, I think we'll be in a good spot to where we want to, whenever Sark wants to call those shots downfield, we'll be in a good enough spot to where he's comfortable enough to call those shots or whatever it is. And, the chemistry off the field definitely helps on the field for sure, because, just the relationship and the rapport that we've all built together carries on to the field. We want to play for each other. We want to play for the guy to our right and our left. It just adds that, extra motivation if it's needed. Yeah, I think that's huge for the quarterback to be that guy who's going to be calm within the storm and just a guy to kind of rely on. And I picture it as when I see a receiver, an O-lineman, a running back, tight end look at me, I want them to see the calmness and hear the calmness in my voice, and just see like, oh, he's calm, like we got this, we're good, If he's comfortable, I'm going to be comfortable. And, I just want to be that guy that just kind of that example for other guys who, might be a little nervous for the situation or for the moment. But, it's the guys that make the plays around me.
On the flip side, Will Howard is the quarterback of the Ohio State Buckeyes and certainly has had a great run here during the college football playoffs. Also, speaking about not making mistakes in the early part of the game, could be the key to success as Ohio State on Friday night looks to take care of the Longhorns.
I think, you don't want to press. You don't want to press to make any wild plays or anything like that because it's the playoffs. And I think, your mindset can't change, from the regular season or either of the two first playoff games that we played. I think we did a really good job of hitting our shots and taking the game as it came. And not forcing any shots. There maybe were some plays where we had even more shots down the field called and had to check it down. Like there's just, you got to take the game as it comes. You can't force things to happen. And in the playoffs, things can come down to one play, and obviously we want to leave no doubt and make sure that it's not like that. But we know that we're playing a really good team in Texas, and we just got to keep playing free. Playing with an edge and doing what we've been doing. And I think we're playing really good football right now, but we just got to keep ramping up and keep getting better and better.
And we will have you covered for all of the college football action coming up this week with our coverage exclusively here on SportsGrid Thursday and Friday. For those of you looking for more information about sports betting, to get the inside edge on all of sports and including our upcoming golf coverage, make sure you download the SportsGrid app, which is available on iOS and Android. In fact, there's a QR code right there. Just take out your phone and scan it. It'll give you the full schedule of our shows, all of our hosts, and, of course, updated odds against the spread in all of the major sports as well. We'll be back with Pat Evans from Legal Sports Report next.
Just 3 games left in this historic college football season. Thursday, Notre Dame.
Notre Dame is definitely one of the top teams in the nation.
Clash with Penn State. Friday, Ohio State looks to slow down the Horns, with the Buckeyes favored to top Texas.
You know what I see? 2 similar plays? Jackpot, cherry. For a big man.
Follow along for every play and every bet with in-game live game day, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
He will never repeat this year again as he gets older. It's not happening. That's not the way the world works. In the NFL, when you get older, your numbers dive. That's all there is to it.
Why did you play him for as long as you played him against Dallas if you weren't going to play him this week to break the record? I mean, you left him in that Dallas game forever.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. We're joined by Pat Evans of Legal Sports Report here as we get into which states potentially could change some of the legislation for sports betting in 2025. And we'll bring Pat in. And all right, so let's get started here and talk about maybe some potential changes in legislation here for the new year. We'll hit on Virginia, maybe an update in Texas as well as Oklahoma. But Pat, let's start off with Minnesota, a state that we've been waiting on sports betting being legalized feels like a couple of years now. Progress made, seems like every year, and then we get to the finish line and nothing has happened. So will that change this year?
You know, it's interesting. I think this will be a state we talk about probably the most between this and Georgia this year, maybe Texas included in there, of states that could get it done. A lot of eyes on it in the industry. To your point, it's been 3 straight years of close, and then you get to the end and it falls apart. Last year, they said it came back together and there was a goal line deal that just ran out of time and they didn't get to vote on it. Well, now we're entering this year. The session officially starts next week, but today, it just started about half an hour ago, there's a hearing in a Senate committee led by John Marty, who we've talked about before on the show, who has introduced a sports betting bill that is very focused on responsible gambling, almost overreaching to the point that the industry is saying, whoa, we don't like this. And my thought initially was, okay, he's bringing this bill to kind of start negotiating. Maybe that's a good sign that the opponents in the Senate are saying, oh, okay, this is going to get done, but we want to make sure we have plenty of protections in. Well, Senator Marty today is holding a hearing in his committee to listen to the ill effects of the economic, social, and I forget what the other societal, economic, and what have you, harms of sports betting. And it is extensively and exclusively opponents of the industry. I've talked to a couple industry sources who are pretty displeased. They reached out to Senator Marty saying, hey, can we contribute to this. And they said, no, this is just for the hearing of the harms of the industry. We've heard plenty about the legislation. We've heard plenty of the benefits and who can profit off of this. So now we need to hear about the harms that this industry will bring our state. There's a couple professors who have done studies on problem gambling. There's a couple representatives from problem and responsible gambling groups from across the country who are testifying. Of course, as soon as I'm done here, I'll tune back into that and talk to you about it next week, kind of the findings of it. So it's still ongoing, of course, so I don't know all the details, but this is kind of a sign that there's going to potentially be even more pushback than in the past in Minnesota. I think, as we've talked about in the past, it's a very bipartisan issue there. The Republicans want the horse racing tracks. The Democrats only want tribal exclusivity. So there's the pushback there. And then, of course, there's people on both sides of both parties who don't want sports betting. And I think that kind of sect is going to push up and push a little harder against it, fearing a united front on the political party side. This doesn't bode well, I don't think. And a few of the industry sources I've talked to are saying, this is going to be kind of the same old story in Minnesota, maybe even worse than a couple of years past. So I'm still optimistic Minnesota gets it done this year because, there's a chance that because of the split in the House, it's a full split 50-50. The Senate's even closer, that only bipartisan bills get done. And because this is such a bipartisan issue, maybe it is something they get done. But otherwise, I don't think a lot's going to happen in Minnesota. And the industry doesn't seem too optimistic about it this year.
All right. Well, we'll follow it along as we go. It seems like the biggest story, at least to start 2025, Pat, is online casino gaming being proposed in a lot of different states across the country. It seems like there's a very big push to get this going. And the latest state is Virginia. Tell us more.
Yeah. So there's a bill introduced in Virginia. I don't think this is too big of a surprise. They have a decent casino industry there. And the thing is, and this is something we've talked about the last couple of times I've come on, as more of these get introduced in Maryland and Illinois as a potential, and Louisiana. There's just so much pushback right now to the online gambling industry. I mean, that Minnesota trial or hearing on its own tells you that. But the U.S. Senate hearing last month, there's so much pushback that I don't know that there's going to be much of an appetite in a lot of these states. Virginia, they do have that land-based casino industry. I think this is just kind of to get the discussion going. And I think what we're seeing, and, we know the National Council of Legislators from Gaming States is putting together and finishing up the final touches to their model iGaming legislation, which is giving these legislators from these different states a model to say, hey, this is what we want to get done, but also kind of a background of this is how we need to educate the rest of the legislators in these states who don't know much about gambling. And if they can do that, then maybe we'll see a little bit more. But for now, I think these bills are mostly just to get the education going and the conversation going versus it's actually going to pass this year. I mean, Maryland has a potential ability to, I think, because they did get it through the House last year. So maybe the Senate, maybe some education was done in the Senate and it can finish up. But if not, I don't think many states will get it done this year. But maybe next year or the year after, because of these conversations that are starting now. I think that's what we've seen in a lot of the states that ended up passing sports betting, is it took a couple of those educational years.
Yeah, it does take time for these things to go through. They start somewhere and then they either go somewhere or nowhere. I mean, that's been the bottom line for sports betting legalization the last couple of years. Well, looks like some real progress being made here in Texas. A former state secretary is backing sports betting here. And look, a lot of folks are backing sports betting in Texas. Some of the biggest names out there involved in ownership and such. I wonder if this will move the needle as well.
You know, they just keep piling the names on. Yeah, this is John Scott, a former Secretary of State who served under the current governor, which of course is kind of where we're seeing some difference in this issue. Is Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is against sports betting and gambling expansion in Texas, and that's the big major block. But to your point, and what we just came is more and more proponents are piling on. Of course, we have the sports team owners, Jerry Jones, Tillman Fertitta, Mark Cuban. Now Miriam Adelson's dumping millions of dollars into the lobbying efforts to get these politicians to say, wait a second, this is great. So we'll see what happens there. John Scott, this former Secretary of State, came out and said, hey, this is something I think that the state needs to do. The Texans want it. We need to give them the ability to vote, which, of course, would require it to pass the Senate, which is where Lieutenant Governor Patrick is. He's long been against it, saying it's not on our party platform. So something needs to happen to convince him to kind of let up the brakes there. And a lot of that is going to have to be with a lot of senators coming out and saying, hey, I'm for gambling, which is, of course, against the party platform. So that's where the sticking point is. This is where the industry is watching. It's a potentially massive market, potentially the biggest in the country. So the industry wants this. The eyes are on it. The strongest lobbying efforts are probably here right now in Texas, because whether it's this year or 2027, it needs to get done. And that's the kind of yearly kind of educational push we've been talking about. It takes time to get these things going, but momentum is building in Texas, and it'll be interesting to see if it pays off this year or if we have to wait a couple more years.
Yeah, agreed. All right, quick update here before you go, Pat. Oklahoma looks like ahead of the legislative sessions here. That starts on February 3rd. There'll be at least some push to get something on the bill.
Yeah, there's been a couple bills in the past that have passed the House, and that's where, Senator or Representative Ken Luttrell has introduced his bill again. There's a Senate companion bill. I think there is appetite here. I think the tribes want it. The problem is there's a big gap between Governor Stitt and the tribes, and the legislator knows that, and so there's a lot of moving parts here, but there's potential for discussion to start and maybe make some headway. It's not a major market, but it's certainly a big tribal market, so it'll be fun to kind of watch what happens here, and hopefully some relations get resolved in Oklahoma.
All right, Pat. Great stuff as always. We'll read all about these stories and more over at LegalSportsReport.com. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Craig. I'll see you next week.
All right, Pat Evans from LSR here with us. All right, coming up next, Simon Applebaum will join us. Of the podcast tomorrow will be televised. We'll talk about the latest merger with Disney and Fubo, and get into some mega content upcoming for ESPN as well. You're watching NewsWire here on SportsGrid each and every Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Just 3 games left in this historic college football season. Thursday, Notre Dame.
Notre Dame is definitely one of the top teams in the nation.
Clash with Penn State. Friday, Ohio State looks to slow down the Horns, with the Buckeyes favored to top Texas.
You know what I see? 2 similar plays. Jackpot. Cherry. For a big man.
Follow along for every play and every bet with in-game live game day, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts, so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
He will never repeat this year again as he gets older. It's not happening. That's not the way the world works. In the NFL, when you get older, your numbers dive. That's all there is to it.
Why did you play him for as long as you played him against Dallas if you weren't going to play him this week to break the record? I mean, you left him in that Dallas game forever.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. We got Simon Applebaum with us from the podcast Tomorrow Will Be Televised to go over the latest in sports media. Simon, great to have you back here on NewsWire, and good to see you once again. A lot to cover here on the show, and finally, I'm happy this is the last time we're going to cover this story, honestly. We probably have to backtrack here a little bit to tell the full story, but it looks like for the time being, Disney and Fubo have agreed to a merger which would end this whole debate and lawsuit with Fubo and Venue Sports. I'm not sure everyone is completely caught up here, Simon, so I'll ask you to start with square one. How did we get here?
Well, we got here, Craig. Great to be back with you and everybody at SportsGrid and Sports Newswire. We got here in sort of an out-of-the-way fashion because it looked like on Monday morning we were going to have the parties, both the folks from Venue and the folks from Fubo, in a court making oral arguments about the lawsuit that was supposed to come up in August. And then a few minutes before 9 o'clock Eastern time, we had the news that Disney had agreed to merge their Hulu plus live TV package with Fubo. So that, as a result, Disney would own 70% of Fubo. David Gandler, the head of Fubo, his management team and shareholders owned the rest of the 30%. So this was really out of the blue. Nobody expected this. There was no advance warning that this was going to happen. So here's the deal. Fubo is initially going to get, when this deal is cleared the regulatory hurdles, $400 or so million to really make Fubo even better. Plus, they're going to run Fubo and they're going to run Disney Hulu plus Live TV as separate entities, although under one banner. The other thing is that Fubo and Disney are going to work together to put together a separate sports entertainment package, separate from Venue. The other big news is this now clears the way for Venue Sports to happen. That's the mega sports channel content venture between Disney, Warner Bros. Discovery, and Fox. So all the legal barriers, they're gone. So the question now is, when is Venue going to launch? We hear that they could make an announcement at any moment, and the thinking is that they will try to launch Venue either right before the Super Bowl, day of the Super Bowl, or shortly after. So the bottom line is we have a meeting of the minds between Disney and Fubo. We have Fubo now with more money to do their thing, maybe introduce more interactive features, introduce a separate sports entertainment package, and most importantly, Venue now has the green light to go as opposed to shut down permanently.
Okay, well, good news on all fronts to get that out of the way, and we don't have to focus on lawsuits as much here on the show, which is no fun. All right, let's get into the latest from the CES 2025, Simon, and 2024, and maybe even the end of 23, really the year of mega content. That was the very big word that was used. It seems like games that we watched in the past, there was only one way. And then mega content started, and there were two ways. Now there's three ways, etc. So many different options to watch these games. Do you think that this is something for the future?
I think so. And one of the big stories so far, we're at the halfway point, by the way, of CES 2025 in Vegas we speak, is artificial intelligence is going to be generating a lot of this because you now have a majority of smart TV sets and smart devices that have artificial intelligence embedded in them. We are talking about more than 90% of all smart TV set households. That's like 115 million TV households. And they are really driving the ball here. So what we're seeing out of the smart TV set makers, out of the device makers, is we're going to do more interactive services. Some will involve sports betting, perhaps. We're seeing, for example, LG has launched a new payment service where you can pay for merchandise. They're using a process called The Take, which announced itself yesterday. They're also making a deal with Samsung, where you can, again, order products and services through your remote or through a special payment system. Roku has a similar thing called Roku Pay. By the way, when you look at the Take's website, they're into ticketing. That could open up a whole big thing for sports revenue, and maybe down the road betting. So I have a hunch that what's going to happen, I hope before this week is out at CES, that we will see somebody say, you know what, we're going to do a sports betting service. And that situation could come tonight when Walt Disney does their annual Global Tech and Data Showcase. That's their upfront event involving technology. It's going to be at 7 o'clock Eastern time. This is a big opportunity for ESPN to announce, here's what we're doing with our quote-unquote flagship mega content service that we're launching this fall. Maybe here's a little hint about what the interactive thing is going to be all about. And maybe, just maybe, we will hear, hey, here's how we're going to do sports betting using ESPN Bet, where you do it through the television set, not through a smartphone.
All right, some fun stuff coming there as well. Well, the Golf League finally launched, the TGL Interactive Golf League, and ESPN has been promoting this now, it feels like, for a year, maybe even more. I know they had a delay as far as getting this going. Finally gets off the ground here, Simon. What are your thoughts on the first night of the TGL?
I saw it. It's very promising. It reminds me of all the efforts by television in the 1960s to expand the game of golf with shows like Shell's Wonderful World of Golf, the CBS Golf Classic, All-Star Golf. Most of them were headed for Sunday afternoons or Saturday afternoons. This is the first time that golf is getting a primetime weekly showcase, and it's in a stadium atmosphere. It's sort of like a Coliseum feeling. It's like you're in an NBA stadium or an NHL stadium, and you're trying to see the golfers. They're trying to make it as personable as possible. The golfers are mic'd. It's also a golf simulator. The technology is very, very good. I thought that ESPN's production values are such that an NBA Finals kind of game. The question is, are we going to see close matches? How is the simulation going to work? Who's going to be on these 6 teams? I thought they did very well with Xander Schauffele being on one of the teams, and also other good players on the other team. This was New York versus Bay. It's going to be interesting to see how this works. But I'll tell you, the Waffle Announcing, by the way, said this is very promising, and this could very well boost professional golf, which right now needs a real kick in the butt when it comes to ratings. The ratings for golf on CBS, NBC, and Live Golf last year were down. And by the way, speaking of that, very quickly, we may see about a new Live Golf contract. If you haven't heard, Live Golf released their schedule yesterday, and they're going to have 3 tournaments up against the FedEx playoffs, which are going to be on CBS this fall. It looks like Live Golf is about to make a deal with Fox and end their association with the CW. So keep your eye on what Live Golf is doing and see if they come up with this idea of we're going head-to-head with the PGA as opposed to scheduling tournaments when they're not doing any.
Simon, does it feel like this is the last shot for Live Golf to make any ground in terms of ratings or interest? I mean, golf ratings, as you said, down universally. I mean, Live Golf has to be the one that's going to suffer the most from this.
Absolutely. Even though they have, they're well-funded, the fact they don't have a TV contract, they've had a tough time getting advertising, and the ratings are down, this may be the end of Live Golf as we know it, unless either A, they do very well with Fox this year, or B, they make that merger final with the PGA.
Simon, great stuff as always. Great to have you back here in the studio, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks for coming on.
You're welcome, Craig. Take care.
All right, Simon Applebaum of the podcast tomorrow will be televised, which you can hear over on Blog Talk Radio. We'll take a quick time out on NewsWire. We'll have some last licks coming up next. Don't go away.
Just 3 games left in this historic college football season. Thursday, Notre Dame.
Notre Dame is definitely one of the top teams in the nation.
Clash with Penn State. Friday, Ohio State looks to slow down the Horns, with the Buckeyes favored to top Texas.
You know what I see? 2 similar plays. Jackpot. Cherry. I'm nimble for a big man.
Follow along for every play and every bet with in-game live game day, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
He will never repeat this year again as he gets older. It's not happening. That's not the way the world works. In the NFL, when you get older, your numbers dive. That's all there is to it.
Why did you play him for as long as you played him against Dallas if you weren't going to play him this week to break the record? I mean, you left him in that Dallas game forever.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on Sports Grid. Looks like Jalen Hurts back at practice for the Philadelphia Eagles this week. Not a huge surprise. They released Ian Book. Hurts expected to play in the team's playoff game upcoming this weekend, but he is back at practice today. That's the latest update in the NFL. Let's now update you on some other topics going on in sports, some on the lighter side and a couple on the heavier side as well. Time now for some last lick. Well, let's begin here in Southern California, where all of you who are watching, certainly our thoughts and prayers are with you. This is not a situation that we certainly thought we'd be talking about here on the show, but very upsetting and tragic videos coming in from what's going on in Southern California with these wildfires, Pacific Palisades and Santa Monica and Brentwood and all the areas in Southern California who are being affected by this. Homes basically being burned to the ground by these fires. And hopefully as people are waking up in Southern California today, they can get some peace with this. Very early, as we know, out on the West Coast as well. Dave Winfield, Hall of Famer in Los Angeles, and a lot of other celebrities and athletes being affected by this, as well as, of course, all just regular folk like you and me out there as well. So certainly be safe out there. And all of us here at Sports Grid are thinking about you while you're going through this. No question about that. All right, so now on the lighter side, so to speak, we'll go to the Auckland Open over the weekend in this tennis tournament. And a gentleman who plays tennis by the name of Cameron Norrie, who you may have never heard of, had a pretty significant accident on the tennis court. He was upset with either himself or something that happens on the court. You know these tennis players, they get upset all the time. And ended up throwing his racket. I don't know if you want to go back and you can Google this. I don't think we could show it. But if you go back and look at it, it seems like it was more of an exasperated throw than it was necessarily throwing his racket into the stands. But that's what ended up happening. He threw his racket. It ended up hitting a woman sort of in the face. It looked like she blocked it a little bit. I guess these are the pitfalls of sitting in the front row of a tennis tournament. But needless to say, she was okay, and he apologized. But not what you expect going to see a tennis match and having to fear for rackets being thrown your way, which is indeed what happened over the weekend. Now, here is something that is unexpected, and I'm hoping is a joke, honestly. At a Tampa Bay Lightning game last night, there was a post on the big board, as they say, the Jumbotron, and here's what it read. This is the middle of the game, folks. Tampa Bay Lightning hockey game. Josh, I think we are better off as friends. Thanks for the Bolts tickets, though, Rachel. I have to think that this is contrived. I got to think that this is made up. Like, who literally would pay to have this put on the Jumbotron and embarrass somebody? Now, it's a very funny joke, by the way, and I'm hopeful that it really is a joke because I cannot see any scenario where somebody would deliberately do this. But I'm sure that everybody in Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg area, got a pretty good laugh out of it. And definitely Rachel, whoever this Rachel is, hopefully she's not the one that really paid for this. And this is like some sort of joke. How mortified would you have to be if you were sitting with this Rachel at a game and you found out that, yeah, this ain't happening for me, but we're just going to be friends? I don't know. All right, that will do it for our show today here on NewsWire. Just want to remind you that coming up at 3 o'clock Eastern, we got Pharrell Coast to Coast. So make sure you stay tuned because he's coming up, followed by Game Time Decisions at 6. In-game live game day at 8 p.m. Eastern, followed by Sports Rage Tonight. So that's where we're all set for you for the rest of the day here. So starting tomorrow here on Sports Grid, things get very hectic, but I want to remind you, we've got some huge college football and pro games coming up this weekend. We've got games Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to cover, and we're going to do it every single day for you here on the show. On Thursday night, we've got the Orange Bowl. Friday night, Cotton Bowl. Saturday, we've got all the NFL action, as well as Sunday and Monday as well. And also, for those of you who play fantasy football or even playoff fantasy football, you can tune into our Saturday and Sunday morning shows, Fantasy Sports Today. It is me and George Kurtz every Saturday morning from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern. And then Sunday mornings, of course, you can catch Joe Pisapia and Matt Stryker. For those of you interested in golf with the new PGA Tour kicking off here in 2025, Smiley Kaufman Show is exclusive here on Sports Grid each and every day immediately after we're done here at noon. So stay tuned for that as well. Thanks to our director, Luke, and for my producer, Frank, and our guests, Pat Evans and Simon Applebaum and Gilbert McGregor. I'm Craig Mish. Enjoy the rest of your day here on Sports Grid, and I'll see you back here for our next edition of NewsWire tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. See you then.